for as long as Naomi could remember. She was taught that family meant support, honesty, and protection. She believed her parents would always have her back. She trusted they understood the long nights she spent working, the weekend she skipped outings, and the sacrifices she made to secure her future. But that belief shattered the day she found out what they had done. They didn't just borrow from her emergency fund. They didn't ask for help. They had stolen it, every last coin, to pay for her cousin Melissa's fairy tale wedding. "Please tell me this is a mistake," Naomi whispered as she stared at her bank account on her phone. Her heart pounded. The money she had been saving for years, her safety net, was gone. Almost every dollar had vanished. Her hands trembled as she tapped through the transaction history. Her breath caught in her throat when she saw the name on the withdrawal. Her own father, Mr. Owusu. Confused and shaken, Naomi stood up and rushed out of her room. She found her mother, Mrs. Owusu, in the kitchen, humming and chopping onions. "Mom," she said, voice sharp, "did you take money from my savings account?" Her mother glanced at her, unfazed. "It was for Melissa's wedding, darling," she said, as if talking about borrowing a spoon. "You're young. You'll save again." Naomi blinked, stunned. That money was for emergencies. "For my future." Her father walked in, overhearing. "Don't be selfish," he said with a frown. "Family comes first. This wedding is important." Naomi looked at both of them, her chest tight with rage. They had taken her hard-earned savings and acted like it meant nothing. At that moment, something inside her shifted. She would not let this go. Naomi couldn't sleep that night. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, her heart heavy with disbelief. Every late night, every double shift, every sacrifice she had made to build that fund now felt like a cruel joke. Her parents had always preached responsibility and hard work, yet they had taken what wasn't theirs without a second thought. It wasn't even a small amount. They had wiped the account clean. And all for Melissa. Melissa, the golden child, the one her parents adored like a daughter of royalty. Naomi's cousin was getting married, and suddenly it was as if the entire world had to revolve around that single event. She remembered the past weeks clearly now, the endless conversations about dresses, cakes, venues. Her parents had been so involved, acting like it was their own daughter's wedding. Naomi hadn't been paying attention then. She thought they were just excited, but now she saw it differently. They were planning something big, something expensive, and when the bills came due, they turned to the one place they could quietly steal from. Her. Naomi sat up, the moonlight slipping through her window. A cold determination settled in her chest. They had taken what she worked for, without asking, without guilt. And now they wanted her to act like everything was fine. "I'm not going to pretend," she whispered to herself. She reached for her notebook and began writing details, timelines, everything she remembered about the wedding plans. She didn't want revenge just yet. What she wanted first was clarity. If they thought she was going to smile at that wedding and act grateful, they were in for a surprise. Naomi didn't know how yet, but she would make sure this betrayal wouldn't be forgotten. The next morning, Naomi walked into the kitchen to find her parents chatting happily over breakfast. Her mother was on the phone with an aunt, laughing about flower choices. Her father sipped his tea with a satisfied look, as if nothing had happened. Naomi sat down quietly and watched them, her face calm but her mind racing. She wasn't ready to confront them again, not yet. Not until she had a plan. "Are you still upset about the money?" her father asked casually, not even looking up. Naomi nodded slowly. "Yes, I am." Her mother put the phone down. "Oh, sweetheart, Melissa's wedding is important. She deserves a perfect day." Naomi didn't answer. Instead, she stood up and left the room. She could hear her mother sigh behind her, whispering, "She'll get over it." But Naomi wasn't going to get over it. She spent her entire afternoon researching every detail about the wedding. The venue, a luxury garden hall in town, had been booked. The guest list was massive. Her parents were handling payments, deliveries, even dress fittings. And with each note she took, Naomi's frustration turned into focus. She knew Melissa wasn't to blame. In fact, Melissa had always been kind to her. This wasn't about the bride, it was about two people who should have protected her and instead chose to betray her. That night, Naomi opened her laptop and began crafting an idea. If her parents wanted to shine in front of the entire family, then they would have to face the truth in front of the same crowd. It wouldn't be loud, it wouldn't be angry, but it would be unforgettable, and it would start with a speech, one they'd never forget. Over the next few days, Naomi moved silently through the house, saying little but listening to everything. Her parents mistook her quietness for acceptance, thinking she had let go of the incident. They continued with the wedding preparations, gushing over menus, rehearsing speeches, and coordinating with vendors. Naomi, meanwhile, kept her notes hidden inside a locked drawer in her room. She made copies of receipts, wrote down the names of decorators and photographers, and even recorded the time her father left to meet the wedding planner. She wasn't just angry, she was preparing. One afternoon, while passing the living room, she overheard her mother laughing on the phone again. "We're pulling it off, Agnes," she said proudly. "Everything's falling into place. Melissa will walk into the wedding of her dreams." Naomi paused at the door, her stomach turning. At what cost? She thought. That same night, her cousin Melissa came by to try on her dress. Naomi opened the door for her, forcing a smile. "Hey, Naomi." Melissa beamed. "I'm so glad you're coming. It means the world to me." Naomi hesitated. "Of course. I wouldn't miss it." Melissa hugged her tightly. "You're the only one who really understands me." Naomi blinked, surprised. "What do you mean?" Melissa pulled away and sighed. "Everyone's so focused on the perfect day, they forget I'm nervous. I wish it didn't have to be such a big thing." Naomi watched her closely. "Did you know where the money came from?" Melissa frowned. "No. Why?" Naomi shook her head. "Never mind." She realized then, Melissa truly didn't know. This wasn't about humiliating her cousin. It was about the ones who thought they could take from her without consequence. And Naomi was ready to remind them just how wrong they were. The week of the wedding arrived like a storm. Everyone in the family buzzed with excitement. Aunties flew in from different towns. Uncles offered to help with last-minute errands, and the house turned into a wedding command center. Naomi stayed quiet, helpful when needed, but always observing. Her parents didn't suspect a thing. In fact, her mother even complimented her. "You've been so mature about everything, Naomi," she said one morning as they folded napkins for the reception. Naomi gave a small smile. "I'm just doing what's best for the family." Her father grunted in agreement. "That's the spirit." Inside, Naomi wanted to scream. "They really think I've moved on," she thought. But she kept her voice calm, her movements steady. On the outside, she was the perfect daughter. On the inside, she was sharpening her words like a blade. That evening, Naomi took a walk alone. She needed the fresh air, the quiet. Her thoughts were heavy, but her plan was clear. She had written a speech, not long, not dramatic, but honest, raw. She rehearsed it under her breath as she walked past streetlights and flowering hedges. This wedding is beautiful, but it came at a cost. She imagined the silence that would follow, the stares, the shift in her parents' expressions. They had stolen from her, but she wouldn't stoop to their level. She would tell the truth, let them sit in it. When she returned home, her father was on the phone bragging about how he'd handled everything. Her mother was showing Melissa a gold necklace, saying, "Naomi's being so supportive." Naomi stood in the hallway watching. Her hands didn't tremble. Her heart didn't race. The time for tears had passed. It was almost showtime. The morning of the wedding arrived with bright sunshine and a soft breeze. The house was filled with excitement, laughter, perfume, clinking jewelry boxes, the rustle of gowns. Naomi dressed quietly in her room, slipping into a simple blue dress she had bought long ago. Nothing flashy, just clean and comfortable. She looked at herself in the mirror, took a deep breath, and whispered, "You've got this." Downstairs, her parents were dressed to impress. Her mother wore a silver lace gown with glittering earrings, her hair swept up in curls. Her father had on a crisp navy suit and polished shoes. They looked proud, successful, and completely unaware that their moment in the spotlight was about to take a turn. "Naomi, are you ready?" her mother called up the stairs. "We're leaving in 10 minutes. Naomi grabbed her clutch, tucked the folded speech inside, and replied, "Coming." At the venue, the decorations were stunning. White roses, floating candles, and soft gold lights wrapped around the pillars. Guests mingled, cameras flashed, and cheerful music played in the background. Naomi moved through it all like a ghost, smiling when spoken to but keeping her focus sharp. She watched her parents beam with pride as they greeted relatives. She saw Melissa in her gown, glowing with happiness, and felt a strange ache in her chest. Not anger, not jealousy, just the sting of what had been lost between her and the people who raised her. When the reception started and the speeches began, Naomi knew her time was near. The microphone passed from one person to another. Warm stories, emotional tributes, and side jokes. Then someone called out, "Naomi, would you like to say a few words?" The room turned toward her. She stood heart calm and walked slowly to the stage. It was time. Naomi stood at the front of the reception hall, the microphone in her hand. Her palms were dry, her voice steady. She looked out at the sea of faces, some smiling, some curious, and two in particular, her parents, watching her with pride and complete confidence. They had no idea what was coming. "I just want to say a few words," she began, offering a small smile to Melissa. "First of all, congratulations to Melissa and David. You both look absolutely beautiful, and today has been nothing short of magical." A wave of applause followed. Naomi paused, letting the room settle again. Then she shifted her tone, her eyes drifting back to her parents. "But I think it's also important to recognize the sacrifices that make a day like this possible," she continued, her voice still calm. "Because weddings like this aren't cheap. They require planning, effort, and sometimes unexpected contributions." A few people chuckled lightly, not yet understanding. But her mother's smile began to fade. Her father tilted his head, eyes narrowing. Naomi pressed forward. "I want to thank my parents," she said, locking eyes with them, "for their creativity, for finding ways to fund such an extravagant event. I especially want to thank them for using my emergency fund, the money I spent years saving, without asking, to make this happen." The room fell into absolute silence. Chairs creaked as people turned to look at her parents. A few gasps echoed in the back. Naomi didn't flinch. "Because hey," she said, lifting her chin slightly, "family comes first, right?" She set the microphone down gently on the table and walked back to her seat. The murmur of confused voices grew louder as the whispers began to spread. Her parents sat frozen, pale, shaken, and for the first time, Naomi felt like she had finally been heard. Naomi returned to her seat with her shoulders straight and her head held high. The weight she had been carrying for weeks no longer sat on her chest. It had been replaced by something else, clarity. Around her, the wedding guests buzzed with quiet murmurs. Whispers floated from table to table. Some guests stared at her in stunned silence. Others glanced awkwardly at her parents, unsure of what to say or do. Her mother sat completely still, her face frozen in disbelief. Her perfectly done makeup no longer sparkled. It looked stiff, almost cracked. Mr. Owusu stared down at the table, his jaw clenched so tightly Naomi could see the tension in his neck. Neither of them said a word. Melissa stood not far from the head table. Confusion and concern etched across her face. She approached Naomi cautiously. "Wait, is that true?" she asked, her voice soft. Naomi nodded. "Every word." Melissa blinked rapidly, trying to process. "I didn't know. I swear I had no idea." Naomi looked up at her cousin, her tone gentle. "I believe you. This wasn't about you, Melissa. It never was." Melissa reached for her hand and gave it a small squeeze. "I'm sorry," she whispered. Naomi simply nodded. Across the hall, a group of uncles exchanged hushed words. Aunties looked around uncomfortably, their expressions painted with curiosity and quiet judgment. What was meant to be a fairy tale celebration was now tangled with awkward silence and the bitter taste of betrayal. Naomi sat calmly through the rest of the reception, sipping her drink, answering no questions, offering no further words. She didn't need to. The damage was done, but not by her. The truth had done what it always does, shattered the surface to reveal what lies beneath. The atmosphere at the reception never fully recovered. Though the music played on and the food was served as planned, there was an undeniable tension in the air. Guests danced half-heartedly, their eyes constantly drifting toward Naomi's table or her parents, who now sat stiffly and avoided all conversation. Mrs. Owusu tried to force a smile whenever someone approached, but the mask slipped each time another relative leaned in to whisper something with raised eyebrows. Mr. Owusu barely touched his food. Naomi remained composed. She chatted lightly with a few cousins who came to sit beside her, none of whom brought up what she had said. But their support was clear in their quiet glances, in the way they stayed close, and how they chose her table over her parents'. Later that evening, when most of the guests had started to leave, Naomi stepped outside for air. The cool breeze kissed her cheeks, and for the first time in days, she felt the knot in her stomach begin to loosen. She had spoken her truth, and while it had shaken the room, it had also set her free. Her parents joined her a few minutes later. They didn't say anything at first. Her mother was the first to speak. "You humiliated us," she said, her voice tight. Naomi didn't look at her. "No," she replied. "You humiliated yourselves the moment you took something that wasn't yours and expected me to stay silent." Mr. Owusu sighed. "We didn't think it would matter this much. It was for the family." Naomi turned to face them. "Then maybe the family needs to understand what that actually means." Neither of them responded. Naomi gave one last look at the reception hall behind them. "I hope the wedding was everything you wanted, because now you know what it cost." The car ride home was painfully silent. Naomi sat in the back seat, staring out the window as the city lights blurred into streaks. Her parents didn't say a word, not even a soft apology. The air between them was thick, and Naomi didn't try to break it. She had nothing more to explain. The truth was already out there, and the silence spoke louder than any excuses they could have offered. When they reached home, her father went straight to his room, shutting the door behind him. Her mother lingered in the hallway for a moment, holding her clutch tightly against her chest. "You didn't have to do it like that," she said finally, her voice low. Naomi looked at her, expression unreadable. "And how should I have done it, Mum? Quietly cried in my room? Waited for you to maybe give it back someday." Mrs. Owusu shook her head. "It was never about the money." Naomi's voice grew firm. "No, it was about respect. And you had none for me." Her mother's lips parted as if to speak again, but then she turned away and disappeared down the hall. Naomi stood there alone, the weight of everything settling in once more, but this time it didn't feel like defeat. It felt like release. In her room, she changed out of her dress and folded it carefully into her wardrobe. She sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the ceiling. The wedding was over. The truth had been spoken, and though nothing would undo the betrayal, she had done what she needed to do. Naomi picked up her journal and wrote one line. Sometimes standing up for yourself means standing alone. But that kind of strength? She had earned it. The next morning, the house felt different, heavier. Naomi woke early, long before anyone else, and made herself a cup of tea. The kitchen was quiet, the kind of silence that hummed with unspoken tension. She sipped slowly, letting the warmth settle in her chest. Her phone buzzed beside her. Messages were already pouring in. Some were from extended family, curious, concerned, or offering subtle support. I didn't know they took your savings. That was wrong. You were brave to speak your truth. Are you okay? Others were less kind. You ruined Melissa's big day. That speech was unnecessary. Naomi read them all, calmly without reacting. She didn't respond. She didn't need to. People could think what they wanted. The ones who mattered had heard her clearly. By midday, Melissa herself called. Naomi hesitated before answering. Hello. Naomi, Melissa's voice was soft. I just wanted to say again, I'm sorry. I really didn't know. I believe you, Naomi said. This was never about you. I know, but I also know how it must have felt. I wouldn't have wanted my wedding built on someone else's pain. Naomi smiled faintly. That's kind of you to say. I'm going to speak to my parents, Melissa added. This shouldn't have happened. I hope someday your parents realize what they did. Maybe, Naomi replied, but I'm not holding my breath. After the call ended, Naomi sat in the living room, alone with her thoughts. She didn't feel victorious. She didn't feel vengeful. What she felt was peace, a strange, quiet peace that comes when you stop pretending everything is fine. For the first time in a long while, Naomi had chosen herself. And that made all the difference. By the end of the week, the gossip had spread across the entire extended family like wildfire. Every aunt, uncle, and second cousin seemed to have an opinion. Some defended her parents, claiming they meant well. Others were shocked, not just by the act, but by the boldness of Naomi's public reveal. Naomi didn't bother correcting anyone. She knew the truth. That was enough. Meanwhile, her parents walked through the days with quiet embarrassment. Mr. Owusu avoided all calls. Mrs. Owusu stopped attending the evening market walks she once enjoyed. They moved like shadows in their own home, carefully sidestepping Naomi as if she were a flame they were afraid to touch. One evening at dinner, her father finally spoke. You've made your point, he said without looking up from his plate. Naomi didn't reply. Her mother added, so what now? You want an apology? The money back. Naomi set down her spoon. I want accountability. I want respect. You stole from me, and you didn't even say sorry. That's not something I forget in a week. Her father frowned. We raised you, gave you everything, and now you humiliate us over money. It wasn't about money, Naomi replied, her tone steady. It was about how you saw me. You saw my hard work, and you treated it like an ATM. No questions, no permission. Just took it because you thought I wouldn't fight back. Silence filled the table again. This time, it was her parents who looked small, cornered by a truth they couldn't escape. Naomi stood. I'm not angry anymore, but I've changed. I'll never let myself be that vulnerable with you again. She walked away, not in anger, but in strength. The kind of strength that only comes from choosing to heal, even when the wound is deep. Naomi spent the next few days focused on rebuilding, not just her emergency fund, but her sense of direction. She opened a new savings account with tighter security, one that no one else could access but her. She returned to her part-time job with a new fire in her spirit, picking up extra shifts without complaint. Her co-workers noticed the change in her. You're glowing lately, one of them said. Naomi only smiled. They didn't know the storm she had weathered. At home, the silence remained, but Naomi didn't mind. She had learned how to find peace without her parents' approval. She no longer waited for them to acknowledge her pain or offer the apology they still struggled to give. That hope had faded, and oddly enough, she felt freer because of it. She started journaling daily, pouring her thoughts into clean white pages. You are allowed to protect yourself, she wrote one night, even from the people who raised you. Each entry became a layer of healing, a quiet reminder that she was not broken, just wiser. On a quiet Saturday morning, Melissa showed up at Naomi's doorstep with a small gift bag. Can we talk? She asked. Naomi nodded and led her inside. I spoke to my parents, Melissa said. They were furious. Not at you, at my aunt and uncle. My dad said if he'd known what they did, he never would have accepted their help. Naomi opened the bag and found a small note handwritten. It read, "Thank you for standing up for yourself. You gave me the courage to speak up too." Melissa continued, "I'll be returning a few of the gifts from the wedding. I don't want anything that was bought with stolen money." Naomi looked at her cousin and felt a softness return. Not all bonds were broken. Some were just beginning to mend. Later that day, after Melissa had left, Naomi sat with the note in her hand, reading it again and again. It wasn't just about the gesture, it was about being seen. Finally, someone had acknowledged the wrong that had been done to her. And more than that, Melissa had chosen to act with integrity. It reminded Naomi that even in the middle of betrayal, goodness still existed. She placed the note gently in her journal, between pages filled with anger, confusion, and growth. It was a symbol of something new, of healing that didn't have to be loud or dramatic, just honest. That evening, while Naomi was cleaning up the living room, her mother came in quietly and stood near the doorway. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Mrs. Owusu said, "Melissa told me what she did, giving the gifts back." Naomi didn't look up. She has a good heart. Her mother sighed, walking slowly toward the couch. "I think I lost sight of what really mattered. I got so caught up in the celebration, in showing off. I didn't stop to think about what I was taking away from you." Naomi paused, surprised at the softness in her mother's tone. "It wasn't just about the money," she said carefully. "It was about how little you thought of me when you took it." "I know," her mother replied, her voice trembling. "And I'm sorry. I should have asked. I should have respected you." Naomi looked at her, eyes searching for sincerity. There it was. Not perfect, not polished, but real. "Thank you," Naomi said quietly. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a start. Sometimes healing didn't come in one grand moment. Sometimes it came in a quiet room, between broken words trying to make their way home. The apology opened a small door Naomi hadn't expected. She still felt the weight of everything that had happened, but now there was space for something else to grow, a cautious kind of understanding. In the days that followed, her mother tried to show change in small ways. She asked Naomi before using the household money. She checked in more. There were still moments of awkward silence, but the air felt different now. Not heavy with guilt, but lighter with effort. Naomi's father, however, remained distant. He barely spoke to her beyond necessary words. One evening, while Naomi was reading at the dining table, he passed by and said without looking at her, "I heard you've been saving again." She nodded. "Yes, I've already built back part of it." He paused. "Good." Then walked away. It wasn't an apology, but it wasn't nothing either. Naomi took it as a small crack in the wall he had built. She wasn't angry anymore. She simply accepted who he was and what he could give. Naomi's focus returned to herself. She took on a side project at work, enrolled in an online course she had been eyeing for months, and slowly built back the future her parents had nearly disrupted. The pain of their betrayal didn't vanish. It lingered like a scar, but it no longer ruled her life. She spent more time with friends, went on weekend walks, and even started a tiny garden on the balcony. Her world began to feel like hers again. One Sunday afternoon, Melissa invited her over for tea. They talked for hours, laughing more than they had in years. "You know," Melissa said, stirring her cup, "your courage changed more than you realize. People are still talking about what you said." Naomi chuckled. "Let them talk. I'm just glad I said it." Melissa nodded. "You gave me a lot to think about boundaries, about voice." Naomi smiled. "We all deserve to be heard, even if it shakes the room." By the end of the month, Naomi's savings were nearly back to where they were before. But she had gained something more valuable than money. She had found her voice. She no longer held back her thoughts to keep the peace. She didn't shrink herself to make others feel comfortable. At dinner one evening, Her parents sat across from her, quiet but present. Her mother reached across the table and gently placed an envelope beside Naomi's plate. "It's not everything," she said softly, "but it's a start." Naomi opened it and saw a few crisp bills inside. It wasn't the full amount, but it was the first time her parents had tried to repay what they took. "Thank you," she said, meeting her mother's eyes. Her father gave a small nod, still not ready for full words, but no longer avoiding her gaze. Naomi took a deep breath and felt something shift again. Not forgiveness, not yet, but maybe peace. The scandal slowly faded from family conversations. New topics replaced old whispers, and Melissa's wedding became just another memory. Beautiful, complicated, and unforgettable. Naomi didn't mind. She wasn't looking for more attention. She had said what she needed to say. That was enough. She no longer tried to repair everything with her parents. She let them show effort in their own time, and she stopped chasing the version of them she used to dream of. One evening, standing by her small garden, Naomi looked up at the sky. The stars were clear, the air warm. She felt a calm she hadn't known in months. She whispered, "I'm proud of you," to herself, and she meant it. Naomi began to journal less, not because the pain had vanished, but because she had written her way to clarity. Her story was no longer one of betrayal, it was one of boundaries, of growth, of claiming what was hers, both in voice and in value. When people asked about the speech, she smiled and changed the subject. It wasn't about keeping the spotlight, it was about keeping her dignity. Melissa stayed close, visiting often. Their bond had grown into something beautiful, honest and mutual. Her parents continued trying, slowly, and Naomi let them with cautious hope. She learned that trust could be rebuilt, but only with time and truth. In the end, Naomi didn't need revenge. What she needed, what she fought for, was respect. And she got it, not in the way she expected, not through apologies wrapped in ribbons or grand gestures of guilt, but in quiet changes, in small admissions, in the power of standing up and saying this is not okay. Her emergency fund had been stolen, but she had gained something that no one could ever take again, her self-worth. She had walked through betrayal and come out stronger, not colder, and that, more than any wedding or whispered apology, was the perfect ending to her story.